Ohio. Kirito Gunzo, or as it's known in the West, Sergeant Frog, is downright one of my favorite anime of all time. Hulu and Netflix both offered it on their platforms at one point but eventually lost it. The only place available to currently watch it is on Funimation's website or by buying the set. The reason I bring this up though is because I went on a bit of a binge watching spree for the series, and while I adore the Funimation dub for the series, I decided to check it out in Japanese. This being because I am obsessed with language comparisons, and while I got my kick from watching it in a different format, this Japanese version rewatch sent me down a Sergeant Frog rabbit hole, and I ended up purchasing the first 3 volumes of the manga from Viz. What got me curious to check it out was the visual style being so distinct from the anime. I mean, look at Kirito. Look at how creepy he looks as opposed to his anime counterpart. Now look at Natsumi. This doesn't quite feel like the same girl, but it is. And in some ways even better, because we get art of her, Fuyuki, and Kirito drawn in styles such as these. The point is that the manga looks great. But here's the reason that I am insanely interested in continuing to read the manga. It's different. Now don't get me wrong, different doesn't mean that one version is lesser than the other. As I mentioned, Kirito Gunzo is one of my favorite animes of all time, and finally getting around to reading the manga is so refreshing because the anime took liberties with its story. I'm seeing this story that I love so much being told from a different perspective, the original perspective, and I'm seeing parts of the story being worked around because certain characters weren't yet introduced in the original run. The anime included characters in manga stories because the manga had yet to introduce them but wanted to include them while adapting the source material. Besides that, we also see character traits being amped up from the manga compared to the anime, characters being portrayed differently in the manga than what would follow suit. Welcome one and all, old, young, male, female, them, and space frogs to what I hope to introduce as an Itsumo Listless series, Manga vs. Anime, and its inaugural episode, Kirito Gunzo, how the anime deviated from the manga. Now, I guess to set up some ground rules for the series, I only plan on covering material that leads to the end of volume 1. This way I can move on to other series and give myself a good amount of space for comparison. The other thing is that I love to cover stuff that started off as a manga and then got an anime adaptation, or something that started off as an anime and then inspired a manga adaptation. Basically what I'm saying is that I just want to read comics. I just want to read manga and watch anime. I don't want to read light novels, and I don't want to play video games because those just take way too much time and I don't have any of it. So if you have any suggestions in that realm, then please just let me know because I want to read comics. So to start off, the anime takes this approach of adapting Kirito's introduction chapters in the second half of the first episode. Episode 1's opening story is actually chapter 4 of the manga, and the second story in episode 1 is chapter 1 and 2 combined. The interesting thing about opening up with chapter 4 storyline is that Natsumi is opposed to the idea of Kirito having his own room is different in both media outlets. The anime's reason for Natsumi being opposed to Kirito having a room is because he is an invader, and in the manga, Natsumi's reason is entirely spiteful. She doesn't want Kirito to have his own room because it was such a struggle for her to convince her mom to give her her own room. And Kirito gets one so easily. How is that fair for her? Oh, and you know how Fuyuki is a big supernatural fan despite having no experience with the supernatural? Fuyuki experiences paranormal phenomenon all the time. The funny thing is that in the manga it is revealed that Aki was able to purchase the house so cheaply because the house is haunted, giving context to the Hinata ghost. In the anime, she kinda just exists. We don't get an explanation for her, and in the manga we see why they have such a nice house with Aki being a single parent. Episode 2 of the anime is mainly the introduction episode for Tama-chan and Momoka. This corresponds with chapter 3 and 5 of the manga. Episode 2 starts off with the kids walking out to school and Kirito wanting to go until Natsumi forbids it. Kirito goes to school anyways and he encounters Fuyuki and later Momoka and Tama-chan. The manga tells the story differently. Natsumi forbids Kirito from leaving the house and Kirito listens. Fuyuki is at school and he's hanging out with his classmates because Fuyuki in the manga is not a total loser. He has friends. As a matter of fact, he ends up joining the manga club and takes over it. But that's probably in a different volume. Whereas in the anime, he's talking to an empty room in the occult club. Fuyuki's first interaction with Momoka is outside the school and Fuyuki notices Momoka's bag and simply asks what's in it. The anime shows this interaction as Tama-chan farting and causing Momoka to leave from embarrassment. This doesn't happen in the manga. She just leaves. She proceeds to take her frustrations out on Tama-chan. Fuyuki feels bad for leaving Keroro at home and goes to hang out with him when Keroro picks up Tama-chan's stress call on the Keroro ball and the two go in search. Also, it's heavily implied that Fuyuki is aware of Momoka's feelings but chooses to ignore them because she's crazy. Episode 3 of the anime is Kiroro's introduction episode and an anime-only story about Keroro feeling trapped inside the house. However, Kiroro isn't introduced until volume 2, so I'll just skip over episode 3. Instead, I'll quickly mention that the manga has a story in which the Hinata girls put Fuyuki to spy on Keroro all day to make sure that he isn't up to anything. It's a great chapter and I highly recommend checking that out instead. It's chapter 6 of the manga in case you're wondering. Episode 4 is the actual Kiroro introduction and the storyline about the humidity causing Keroro to get drunk. The Humidity Story is in volume 1 of the manga, but it is completely different. As I mentioned, Kiroro isn't introduced until volume 2, so automatically that's different. The episode is Kiroro pushing for Sarge to take the invasion seriously by pumping him up with the humidity machine. The manga tells the story as being the result of a rainy day. The rain causes Sarge to feel the power. Keroro is so hyped up that he decides to kickstart the invasion by attacking Natsumi, who's changing out from her wet clothes. Tama-chan tries to intervene and is pushed back by Keroro. However, this happens in the anime as well. In the anime, this episode ends with the introduction of the Niruro, who sucks Keroro dry until he's sober again. In the manga, the story ends with Fuyuki getting tired of Keroro's shit and scaring him straight. Episode 5 is anime-only content that corresponds with nothing in the manga. Episode 6 is the Momoka Island story and corresponds with chapter 8 and 9. The anime version has a lot of things different from its manga counterpart. Momoka picks up Fuyuki on her helicopter and head to the private island. On the beach, Momoka tries to get Fuyuki's attention and pretends to drown, but Fuyuki can't swim, and so Momoka eventually does drown and has her first kiss by an alien. The second part of the story is Momoka creating the Test of Courage challenge to be with Fuyuki alone. Everyone has a great time, and at the end, Momoka reveals the absurd amount of money that she spent to create this event with Fuyuki. Right off the bat, the anime version is the introduction to Momoka's faithful butler Paul, who isn't introduced until volume 3. Because of that, the B-plot of Paul vs. Kiroro is not anywhere included in the manga. Kiroro and Paul's battle causes Momoka to start drowning, but in the manga, it's Keroro and Tama-chan who make her drown by trying to help save her. Natsumi saves Momoka and Keroro unleashes space tentacles to save Momoka. Chapter 9, Momoka administers the Test of Courage and Aki and Natsumi are the first to encounter the Hinata ghosts. Fuyuki and Momoka encounter a soldier ghost, or something. It's pretty heavily implied that he is a ghost, just based off the text on the manga. And Fuyuki takes off running holding Momoka's hand. Keroro and Tama-chan go off and find the ghost soldier who turns out to be very kind and may not actually be dead, but who really knows. The chapter ends with Momoka, Fuyuki, and Natsumi and Aki all sharing a bed, making Momoka's trip worth it. Finally, chapter 10 of the manga is the introduction to Angle Mall, which corresponds to the first story of episode 7. Part 2 of episode 7 is covered in volume 3. The only thing the same in both formats is Keroro encouraging Mall to destroy Earth to make it easier to conquer. However, the chapter starts off with Fuyuki walking home with groceries on a hot day. He takes a break at a bench when Mall falls from the sky. Fuyuki takes her home with him. When she wakes up, she's afraid that she's been captured and reveals that she is the Lord of Terror and begins to destroy Earth. Keroro comes out angry because it's ruining his Gundam building and is reunited with Mall, who calls him uncle. They reminisce and Keroro encourages the destruction. Fuyuki convinces Keroro to stop by reminding him that there will be no more Gundam models if Earth is destroyed, to which he finally gets Mall to stop. Fuyuki remembers the prophecy of Angle Mall and says that at least it came true in their household. The anime adapts this chapter by having Fuyuki tells Keroro about the prophecy that didn't come true. Mall falls from the sky and Fuyuki and Natsumi bring her inside the house. She wakes up and Keroro is passing by and she recognizes her as her uncle, but Keroro doesn't recognize her until she transforms. Mall reveals that her cell phone is the key to her powers and Kiroro steals the phone to kickstart the invasion. Mall eventually starts destroying and Keroro encourages her until Fuyuki convinces him not to. The episode ends with Fuyuki recounting the prophecy to Natsumi and revealing that Keroro is included in the prophecy as well. That last bit of information is also included in the manga. Oh, and one last thing. The manga takes place in 1999. The anime takes place in 2004. Funimation's dub takes place in 2009, so just keep all of that in mind when you're watching or reading the series. And there you have it, Volume 1 of Keroro compared to the anime adaptation. I decided to exclude some story bits for the sake of letting you, dear viewers, have the opportunity to read the manga for yourself. There's plenty of little things that I did not mention, and I completely glossed over chapter 5. As I mentioned, I only intended to cover the first volume of the series and pretty much finish off where its anime counterpart ends. Volume 1 of Keroro Gunzo ends on the chapter that introduces Angle Mall, and there's enough differences here that may encourage you to throw down some money at Viz or Funimation. Not that I'm sponsored or anything, because I'm definitely not sponsored. Oh, and go find other deviations for yourself. The point of the series is to show you that anime adaptations are adaptations of source material, and sometimes the adaptation deviates, and that's okay. This means that there's more material to go in search of your favorite story. Also, these deviations are set to help the anime find its own footing so that the property can stand on its own. But if you ask me, after reading some of the manga and watching the anime, I have to say that I prefer reading Keroro Gunzo over watching the anime. And if you liked this video and found it insightful, then please consider subscribing. Like, comment, and subscribe, and share this video out to anyone who you think might find it interesting. Keroro Gunzo is really good, so please go read the manga. Or go watch the anime at least. I really worked hard on this video. It was such a long process to get it here, but it's finally released, and I'm so happy to share it with all of you guys. Oh, and if you have suggestions, please let me know so I know where to go from here. But I think that the next topic that I want to cover in this realm is probably Dragon Ball, just because I already own the first volume of the manga. So we'll see. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, cha. The anime included characters in the manga stories because the manga had yet in... The anime included characters in the manga stories... The anime included...